Hi, everyone. Welcome to Around the Ladder. I'm Erika Steinberg, and this is the podcast about career paths that don't follow the usual script. We've all heard about climbing the corporate ladder, but careers often zigzag, they stall, they take unexpected turns. If your journey hasn't been a straight climb, you're in the right place. I love the idea of going around the ladder and finding a path that fits who you really are. In the show, I get to talk with people who have taken unconventional routes, either by choice or by chance, and they found success on their own terms. Today's guest is my friend Stacy Thal. Stacy is a seasoned MVP brand strategist. We're going to get into what MVP means also. Harnessing her 20 plus years of experience, Stacy bolsters investor portfolios by providing differentiating brand and creative strategy. Stacy helps investors, founders, and marketing leaders build breakthrough brands at the intersection of authenticity and AI-driven insights, combining startup speed with systematic frameworks that drive growth without the typical agency bloat and overhead. Ultimately, she really helps investors and founders sleep better by building rock solid brand foundations that can support the weight of their growing businesses and inspire compelling company cultures. We're going to have so much to talk about, Stacy. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you.
That intro was enough. Can we just call
I
it?
know we should
Leave
just
on a
stop it at
high.
that, but
That was
I have a
amazing.
whole bunch of
Thank
questions
you.
for you. So
Good.
let's just jump right in. I do want to take some time. Let's like take a step back, because you've been helping businesses build their brands for decades now, but your career also has not been a straight line. So was there a particular turning point when you realized that what I call the traditional path, I've got to stop calling it that because maybe there isn't one anymore, but when you realized that the traditional path wasn't your path, and what did it feel like to make that leap also?
Yeah. It's such yeah, for me, it's an interesting story to reflect back on. Of course, I'm going to bring to it the hindsight of 2020 being 2020, right? Looking back in my rear view mirror, I can make more sense of it. But I think I had a very typical experience that happens with folks where, what do they say? People don't quit companies, they quit bosses. And I had the last of, a terrible, horrible bosses like that movie. I had the last of the horrible bosses that I could take. And I was in my 30s and just found that, I was in yet another circumstance where I had this very terrible boss who was beyond a hostile work environment situation. I was learning a ton there. She had poached me, ironically, from another job that I had and really elevated it. It was at this PR firm in San Francisco. So I cut my teeth on PR. And I'd learned so much from her, but I could not bear being with her anymore. And what I learned under her tutelage was that people didn't know how to write or market themselves.
Mhm.
And they might have brilliant ideas, they might be in a mission-driven, passionate business or calling or nonprofit or whatever it is. But they didn't really know how to connect the dots between their vision and their goals and what their end user, customer, client, or whatever wanted. And so I got that insight from working for her, but I couldn't bear that she, her as a boss. So I did this, sketchy thing where I wrote a note. I went in there like 6 o'clock in the morning or something downtown San Francisco, high rise, wrote a note and said, I quit, put it on her
Was it a
desk. And I
post-it
had, it
note?
was just so bad that I had nothing else. I've learned since then in either leaving jobs or whatever that, to like have something set up before you go. But I went home, healed from that for a couple days, and then old school style just looked on Craigslist. And in my mind was, I wonder if people pay people to write. Right. And so I saw a couple of opportunities there that opened up for me. And so I became an accidental entrepreneur. I became an accidental independent contractor. I was trying to, be able to pay my rent in between when I found my next job. And I sort of stumbled into this lifetime of entrepreneurship that really fit my temperament, my schedule, my, sensitive nature, fit all that stuff better, where I could be my own boss. And so I'm proud of myself for going out on my own. And it sort of caught fire where by each client that I had, I got more and more confidence and gratefully, lucked into and had enough energy and ambition there to find that work. And it really showed me the difference, having worked for years in-house for people, that I had the discipline, the interest, and the lifestyle that could be supported by being out on my own.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to talk a little bit about, I'm kind of, I'm looking at my list of questions and I'm skipping around because I do want to talk about the work that you're doing now, and something that I alluded to in when I introduced you is this concept of MVP brand strategy. So it's a powerful concept. Like, how did you develop it? Was it born of necessity? Was it from frustration, inspiration, everything?
Yeah. Yeah. So MVP for folks that might not be in that world is sort of like a tech term of the minimum viable product, right? And so I use that same approach with the work that I do because everything today is so fast moving, so, quickly developing that it's all about testing, learning, and iterating. But in my incredible winding journey, I was out on my own for 10 years solidly, successfully as an independent contractor consultant. I built that business. I bought a home for myself as a single woman in San Francisco, no small feat, based on that success. And then the economy tanked in 2008. And I had done some independent work for Walmart.com, and Walmart Stores Inc. came to the Bay Area from Arkansas to pull off the brain trust in the Silicon Valley to create a brand creative department for their proprietary brands. And so I went in-house for a number of years, so they like I got a port in the storm, and then it was like a holiday after being almost 10 years on my own. It was with that ebb and flow that you get into that's hard to take sometimes. It was like a holiday every 2 weeks with that direct deposit getting in my account. And so I got very wedded to that. But because I was, in-house and started to ride the wave of the very volatile wave of the top of brand storytelling and the volatile world of Silicon Valley marketing and advertising, I was laid off 5 times in 10 years. And each time I would default back to my consulting work. I also did 5 years at a proper agency during that time. So what it showed me is whether I was in the enterprise side or I was serving founders of startups and other businesses, or on the agency side, that if folks didn't take the time and invest in doing the foundational work of creating a brand strategy that is the hard work of figuring out what your mission, what your vision, what your values are, what the value propositions are, who your client is, and all that stuff. If you skip from my cousin's brother's girlfriend is a graphic designer, she can do a logo for us. I like the color blue. We have a brand, If folks on all levels skip over that, that's one of the greatest contributors I saw, and with wearing all those different hats, of the 82% failure rate that we see of businesses in the first 5 years. That it can be lack of product market fit, it can be great idea, terrible management, but a lot of it is about not doing that foundational brand work that informs and inspires a differentiating look and feel and voice and tone, and also shapes culture so that you can have some there,
Yeah,
both
yeah, your
to,
internal culture, your
yeah,
company
your
culture.
internal
Yeah.
culture, right, exactly. So to attract and retain the right kind of talent, the right people.
Mhm.
So that's the thing that emerged for me, is that I saw that when people skipped over that, um, that they failed. And so I found a kind of systematic way to do that quickly, having done a lot of, 5 years in a proper agency with all that agency bloat of things taking months and hundreds of thousands of dollars and a team of six. I figured out a way to trim all that down for the startup community so that it could be really nimble and affordable. That I can do in less than a month's time, maybe 2 weeks, to get all that stuff done. So that's where that emerged from.
Yeah. So I have two questions based on that. I'm just trying to decide which
Yeah.
one I know which one I'm gonna ask first. So you've worked with a lot of different companies. I know you've worked with Google and Meta. You've supported hormone health and cookie brands, both near and dear to my heart, of course. When I
They go
think about,
together.
yeah,
Lots of
right. When I think about a common thread, at first I was thinking like, what's that? What is that? What it unites that work for you? Is it this notion um, of, what you just talked about, that, companies at any level will say, "Oh, I like the color blue and I'm going to have like my friend's cousin design a logo for me and boom, now I have a brand." Is it like is a uniting factor a misunderstanding of what brand is, or is it something else?
I think honestly, the uniting factor is money. That I have a mortgage to pay. I think that was where it started,
Yeah.
right? It's like, who is going to say yes, or who is calling, right? Sort of like my dating. Like, you like me? Great, let's go out. Or, like back in the day, until I learned over time to be able to have some discernment.
Yep.
So, from that, I have a lot of experience in a lot of different spaces. I think what it taught me that is great that came out of it is a kind of joy that I get from being industry agnostic. That means that I get to dip into all sorts of different worlds, talk to all sorts of different smart people from different walks of life. And so much of what I learn with each client is transferable to the next, whether we're talking about hormones or large scale construction equipment rental,
Yeah.
right? What do those two have to do with each other? What they have to do with each other really is either brands that are looking, companies, CMOs, founders, investors that are looking to launch or pivot or grow, that need that foundational brand strategy, that need some sort of there. I spent a lot of years as a creative director, and the first thing any sort of designers or copywriters of any kind at any level, when they go in to do the work, the public facing work, they ask, what is the there? Where are the brand guidelines? What
Yeah.
do we stand for? Who is our customer? And it was astounding to me that a lot of people don't have those answers. What they have is they have the goal of how much money they want to make and some sort of assumption based on their competitors of what they need to do. But there's no real internal driver. So there's not this solid foundation when things, ebb
Yeah.
and flow like that to go back to retreat to check in with,
Yeah. Where they
before
have it, but it's
North
not
Star.
documented, it's not shared,
Yeah,
it's
it
not
might be
common
in
knowledge,
someone
it's in somebody's head.
could be in somebody's head, and then as startups grow, you get other stakeholders in there, and they have a different interpretation, or that whatever it is in their head hasn't been articulated or isn't down in some sort of form factor, something that can be a touchstone that can coalesce all the people within the organization. Mostly, I think I started it to smooth the approvals process, especially in my enterprise work at Google and things like that, hypothetically. I found that there were so many different stakeholders that were siloed, that weren't talking to each other, that it was very hard to get great work through, even
Mhm.
if it was what we knew was going to speak to the customer, because the stakeholders had different ideas or different interpretations of what our end goal was or what the North Star was. We could not get it through the approvals process because it was this constant loop of, whatever discussions, arguments about, who the customer is and what should be happening.
Got it. Okay. So now that brings me to my other question, which was, you were talking about this, you don't have a good foundation for a brand, which is what we've been discussing. And I've heard you say this, that there's the danger of building a brand on shaky ground. So we know now what shaky ground looks like. What does it look like when you have solid brand strategy in those early stages, even though things still feel chaotic? Like, are there signs that you're moving from shaky to solid?
I think mainly what it is that everybody is on the same page, right? That everybody has the same understanding of it, so that you're pointed in the same, I mean, it's corny, whatever, it's like rowing in the same direction, right? But there's something to be said to that, because if you're not, right, how are you moving? You're moving, maybe you're going to tip over. So I think it's mostly the signs for me are is, let's say, the in-app user experience showing up with the same voice and tone, look and feel as the website, as the social ads, or maybe we're calibrating a little bit for audience, but is there a consistency of messaging that's going out to the world in your different touch points?
Mhm.
And how, again, back to how are the approvals processes going? Like, are we sailing through that smoothly because everybody is understanding what the brand is, what the personality is of the brand, what our central mission is, and who our customer is, most importantly? Is everybody understanding that? And because it's MVP, testing, learning, iterating, if we're testing, learning, and iterating, and we're getting that data back, and the customer, whatever end user clients are reflecting back to us that that's not the right thing, how smoothly are we recalibrating
Uh-huh.
together to get to true that course again?
So even though it might feel chaotic, it seems that it's uh you can say that you're on more solid ground the way the organization reacts to what's going on and navigate
Yes.
it at that point.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of it is that what I tried to do with the system that I have to get people through this, creating a solid strategic brand foundation is it's usually when you work on the agency side or some other, consultancy, they give you like a 70-page deck. This is all the different things, and these are different competitors and all this competitor analysis and stuff like that. And my deliverable at the end of things, while we may go through the process of looking at each element of it and tearing it apart and putting it back together, is one slide with a grid that has your entire brand important stuff at a glance so that it doesn't create digital dust, that
Yeah.
is actually something that you can pass on easily, that's grokkable, at first sight, and that has all the answers there so you don't have to wade through everything. So that's another part of it. Like, are people using that touchstone?
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So a lot of this, I would imagine, moves very quickly, or startups are always focused on speed, at least um in my understanding, like fast launches, fast pivots, fast failure, fast funding. How do you convince founders to slow down and get strategic and stay strategic without losing momentum?
Right. Well, yes, that's the hard part, right? That's the hard sell, and
It's
that's
like you
the
want to they have to be who they're going to be.
yeah, that's the hard sell in the education, right? Is that everybody is under enormous pressure to produce, sell, right? And so lots of times I will say that if there is a niche for me, it is folks that have companies, founders, investors that have gone out to market with a product, service, whatever it is, and they have some sort of learning back, either traction or lack thereof, given how they showed up at the market in the marketplace.
Mhm.
And so lots of times what I'm enlisted to do is that they either need to grow up, like it's time to adult now. Maybe they threw a website up and went to some sort of event. That was one of the clients that I had. Threw up a website, went to an event, was a huge splash, came back and was like, oh God,
What
we
do we
have
do
all these
now?
orders. And like, what do we do now? And then how do we capitalize on this too? So they realized that they didn't know how to get there. They didn't know what they should say on their website or what their message was or what the differentiation was truly, with any sort of real analysis behind it of their competitors, what the white space was for them.
Mhm.
So that is a bit of a niche for me, is folks that know that they need to slow down, but have some nerves for sure. Like, how slow? How much do we slow down?
Yeah.
And how much is it going to cost? How much time and how much is it going to cost? So I think, one of my selling points is that I have figured out how to quickly, methodically do this in rapid fire.
Yeah, yeah. And like, how do you, I would imagine for something like that, like you've got to get into the brain of the founder. Like, so how do you approach translating what's in this founder's brilliant and possibly messy and chaotic brain into a clean, compelling brand voice? Like,
Yeah,
how does it go from A to B?
right. Not always easy for sure, but I think it's
Well, of course not. Then everyone would do it.
stop doing it, everyone. Let me do it. Um, Yeah, I think that that's part of the cumulative effect of the experience that I've had, especially in-house experience, but also my consulting experience as well. Being at the table with the C-suite folk. So I have some whatever innate ability and then hard won, every one of my silver hairs, hard won experience, having a seat at that table and understanding how to have those conversations that are kind of tough, where you're trying to tease out what that information is and then have the courage to reflect back to whoever it is, the founder, let's say, that may think they're clear and may not be, or may be headed down the wrong path. So a part of it is acute listening skills and experience, hanging with those people, and then a bit of courage in being able to have hard conversations. And I think, what I do in my methodology is like, give me all the materials you have. Sometimes they have nothing and it is just stuck in their head.
Mhm.
Sometimes they have a flood of things that have been iterated on over time, and I try to absorb all those things. And then it becomes a sort of Q&A. Like, I saw this in your materials. Is that still true? You have your mission written as X, but I see that you're not living that in the business that you're doing over here. Tell me more, about that. So I think it's conversation. And then oftentimes I go away and lean on my way, way back machine copywriting past, to be able to really articulate that stuff, and infuse it with, the brand voice if that is established.
Yeah. And when you're having that conversation, like that brand conversation, what makes it feel different when it's working? Is it that everyone's aligned? Is it something else, some other secret sauce? Like,
Uh, yeah, I mean, alignment would be fantastic,
yeah.
right? But but alignment, I think, is a process. So I think it's being able to navigate through, especially if there are, many people, and oftentimes there are, right? There's, even if you're working with a kind of solopreneur or a founder who has, an incredibly lean team or is a one person band, they often have investors or board members that they want to bring in on the conversation, or other trusted advisors or something like that. Um, so I think it's just about navigating those conversations and listening acutely and trying to, again, be courageous in the moment to pull people onto the same page and be able to, almost like couples therapist. Right, is to be able to hear these folks over here and these folks over here and figure out what the middle is, and trying to bring people in,
Yeah.
because ultimately that's what we need to do. I'm there generally to advocate for the client, customer, end user, right? That's what I'm trying to do, is
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull everything out of the beautiful minds. Because that's an interesting phenomenon that happens. Like, it starts out with, I just know there's, some brilliant idea. I just know there's a market for it, and then maybe they've tested it, or there's, what is it? Necessity being the mother of invention, or something like that. But then in the push to go to market and whatever pressures, especially if you have investors, all that original stuff gets lost somehow. The customer gets lost in the mix, and it becomes about the numbers, and how do we sell, and trying to crack that code, and tweaking, 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 instead of having some courage to hang in there and let something play out a little bit. So it's a delicate dance. I don't know. It's a delicate dance, that I try not to step on anybody's toes while I do it.
Yeah. I really like the notion of you representing and advocating for the client,
Yeah.
because, in it, because they can get lost in the process for, very good reasons. That segues perfectly into something that I noticed on your LinkedIn profile. And I wonder if this is where that comes from, that your LinkedIn profile mentions that you come from a long line of activists and advocates and entrepreneurs. So I would imagine that energy that's been in your family and around you is showing up in this way, so that even now you're advocating for the unseen client or customer for your clients.
Yeah.
How else has that shaped you, like when you show up in boardrooms and in branding conversations and you're talking with founders?
Yeah, well, I try to be. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think I'm glad that you saw that. You dug in, saw that in the deep dive. That's a kind of recent revelation about what drives me. I think that, many of us, I had a turning point. So again, I was out on my own, economy tanked. I went in house. I got wedded to that every 2 weeks holiday of direct deposit. But it was during the pandemic where many of us had this, existential professional crisis of who am I? What am I doing here? How long am I commuting? Who do I want to be when I grow up? All that stuff. And part of that led me to this realization, having been laid off for the fifth time in 10 years on the edge of the pandemic and everything. I had to do this forced soul searching that many of us did. And I realized that I was much better off on my own, and that my want for a steady paycheck came from a place of fear. And that when I looked at the math of it, getting laid off, 5 times or 5 times in
Yeah.
10 years, is every couple of years having to turn that machine up of LinkedIn and all the networking and everything. And then I would go back and like, oh, just focusing on my job now. And it was laborious. But more than that, in that soul searching that I did, I realized that I was just much happier, much better, more productive, more lucrative on my own. But I didn't really have I felt like I didn't have the guts for it anymore. And so I did, that kind of excavation
Yeah.
of my soul and realized that I'm okay, on my own, that I come from a long line of entrepreneurs and activists, and that I have always been a consumer advocate, in that
Yeah.
way. And that's where I really wanted to stay, and that's where my value is that I can hold those two things at the same time, right? The founder, investor, whatever's goals, their vision, and what the customers really want, and be able to hopefully gracefully advocate for that in there. But I think that's just, I connected with that spirit then when I was at this crossroads that many of us faced. Do I go back in house and try to force that in this volatile job market, or, in the volatile market period, do I bet on myself?
Yeah. And it also sounds like you let go of a good amount of fear that maybe you had been unconsciously holding on to.
Yeah, I tried, and I think it's like calling in the ancestors, right? Of I've been okay. I've always landed on my feet. My mind, like many others, tells me it's different this time. I'm older this time. Look what's happening in our country this
Yeah.
time, right? And all not wrong. Um, but I think it was more about realizing that it was fear that was holding me back, but I could keep moving anyway. Like feel the
Yes.
fear and move, do it anyway, kind of thing. Corny but true. And that the fear doesn't go away. I don't have a great temperament for the ebb and flow. It's not a good mindset for me. I'm not a happy camper, and it is a really volatile market out there. So much feels like it's changing every day, all day long now, and so I still don't love that, but I have a long history, and that was modeled for me is, gratefully, is this kind of activism, advocacy, and entrepreneurship that's
And
just in
and you
the
can sit
blood.
with the discomfort. Obviously, you can sit with you can be in the discomfort and just kind of say, okay, I've been here before. I know what it feels like. It doesn't feel great, but I know where it goes.
And I think that I remember I reached out to a therapist and said about that, like work-related anxiety, financial insecurity, all that stuff. And it was like, I need an exorcism. Is there what kind of modality of, psychotherapy is there an exorcism? Because I need to get rid of this fear. And I think that the process was um, having been laid off as many times as I was, that the illusion again of a steady paycheck was just that, and that all of it is volatile, and the insecurity of it, the ebb and flow of it isn't going away. There's nothing. I kept trying to force to crack the code of consistent, that where I would feel more secure. And I don't know that that's out there. I mean, I'll keep trying, but the way that I was gripping onto it to try to get rid of the fear rather than, I'm just so corny, but making friends with it,
Yeah,
just accepting that this is part and parcel of what it is right now. And there is no, that I can see for me at this point in my career, a grass is greener option as an in-house employee,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. So, a conversation with you would not be complete if we didn't talk about AI. And you mentioned the word crossroads, and it reminded me of when I introduced you that, you help leaders build breakthrough brands at the intersection of authenticity and AI-driven insights. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I've learned so much about AI and how to use AI through you. So I'm always
Oh,
grateful.
thank you.
And
Glad.
but yeah, but I want to talk a little bit more about that because you use both. You use you're the human, you use the human part of yourself, and then you also augment with AI. So let's talk about how the two show up together for you.
Yeah, well, that too has been a journey, right? And what a rapid fire journey it's been. I think it's called AI years now, like dog years, but AI years is like, 2 decades in 2 weeks. And I think even just a year ago, it started out where folks like me who were sort of curious and also terrified about the implications of where it could lead us, and I still feel that way for sure. But also intrigued about what could it do for me as somebody who's out on my own. Boy, how helpful would it be to have a thought partner, at different moments. But I started experimenting with AI, starting out with ChatGPT, and that was on the DL, right? I was like, "No, I'm not going to tell my clients or whatever because it felt like cheating." And then I saw how limited AI is when it comes to, especially in the world where I work, where it's brand and any kind of marketing writing at all. It's does not have the capacity yet of nuance, of human nuance, and um, even with a prompt that is incredibly, airtight and 3 pages long, context can still be lost and human experience isn't part of it, right?
Mhm.
So, um, so I began to use it as a thought partner. And what I realized is that, my ability to serve my clients was hampered by my inability to, because of their budget and my own limitations, because I'm not like a data and analytics or market research company, when I would have like solid instincts and the best desk research possible pre-generative AI, to prove out my point of wherever I was pointing folks in the market brand wise through the, foundational brand strategy stuff. That I couldn't be the market researcher or the data and analytics, but now I can plus up what I do to put some meat on them bones, right? To put some efficacy behind that. The better and better that AI gets, right? So that's the journey with that. So for my clients, I think that I had a couple of clients over the last year that I was taking over a department for them as a fractional leader over brand and creative. And I was given zero resources because they were like, well, use AI. It's like, but I can't do that for the marketing. Why not? I can't do that for your copy for your website or your ads. Well, why not? Well, because it's not really great in that way. But there was a lot of pressure on time and, super lean teams and couldn't do it. So I was like, okay, like I'll try it. So did the human thing, put the prompts, got better and better at prompts to try to get it closer and closer. Um, and then put that copy out there with my human, editing on it, and then got feedback like that's not who we want to be. That's when I was like, that's what I was saying, y'all. So just getting better and better at bridging that gap between using AI as a thought partner or to back up um, where we're headed rather than the end product itself. So more as a thought partner, and then bringing that to bear for my clients as well as exposing myself to different companies and having a lot of meetings and doing having a lot of people do a lot of demos for me for like all the products that are, debuting all day long now in AI, but settling on some that really feel like there's some really interesting stuff there that can speak to efficiencies and automation and that have some efficacy there, that are really thoughtful, that are taking some of the either the drudgery away from what we do now, to elevate the humans up to do the real strategic thinking and the nuanced thinking and the relational, stuff, or bolstering the human assumptions, or pressure testing and bolstering the human assumptions, based on real human experience. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah. Yeah. I can and it tracks with everything that I know about you also, or the conversations that we've had outside of this forum right here. So I have one last question because believe it or not, it's already been more than half an hour. It's flown by. I know, I know. What unexpected lessons or rewards have come from your going around your own ladder rather than climbing a more traditional one?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. I think it's a deep question for me because I come from a childhood that had a significant amount of poverty. So I have this poverty mindset as part of the driver where I said in honesty, like, like what drove you to this? Well, money, was the
Yeah.
first. Um, but I think that what it proved to me really is on a deeper level is that to have a better relationship with the anxiety that I have, where I have this human need for like safety and security, for some kind of stability in what I experience as a very unstable world, right? And so if I can control my, realm, then I can be okay. But there's so much that through this trial by fire, in this volatile world, having a better relationship with the fear itself and figuring out how to traverse that and accept that rather than trying to get rid of it, and just to accept it as part of the process, part of the reality, because I'm smart enough to know all my fears could come true, but that doesn't help me. That's not, I don't need that stick. I need more of the carrot of hope than
Yeah.
I do the stick of fear, right? So I think that that's the unexpected thing is, and on a deeper personal level, is that I have more capacity and resiliency than I think, and that first blush of fear, while true, is not helpful. It's not a helpful place to be in my head or steep myself in my life. Better to just keep one foot in front of the other and accept the ebb and flow for what it is.
Yeah, it could be helpful for 1 second or 1 minute to get you on your feet to be like, okay, do I need to do, like this is a trigger. I need to look around and see what I need to do. If it continues to be fear and holding you back, then it's overstayed its welcome.
Yeah, and worry is not preparation, right? Like when does
Yeah.
it take over from I have this rightful fear, think it about it, address it, however you process it, whatever, talk to people about it, mentors, really important, all that stuff. Reach out to Erika. And then but when it tips over into worry, that's not motivating. That just sucks the life out of you,
Yeah.
right? But it's hard not to, right? That's just
Yeah.
a human thing.
Yep. And like you said, it could be you're smart enough to know that all of your fears could come true, but it's also just as true that none of them could come true.
And generally they
So which
don't.
one
That's the
which one do you
truth.
want to pick?
I
So,
know. I'm in, yeah, I'm in some primal fight and flight or
yeah.
fawn and cut, duck and cover and all that stuff all the time. But yeah, need not be, right?
Yeah,
Because yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has gone by so quickly. I can't
Oh,
believe it, like
yeah,
most of our conversations do. So
absolutely.
this one just happens to be recorded and we'll share it with a bunch of other people.
Let's do
So,
it. Yeah.
well,
Thanks, Erica.
thank you so much. That is it for this episode of Around the Ladder. Remember, there is no right way up, no one right way up. So take your detours, make your moves, keep carving your own path. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or a colleague who's on their own unconventional journey. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.